Every week on the Totally Radvertising podcast, we meet with founders, CEOs, writers, and directors to talk about the creative choices that have made the biggest impact on their brands. And this isn't just any podcast because
it's totally radvertising.
I'm Dallin Koski.
And I'm Damian Dayton.
It's totally rad. It's totally radvertising.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Totally Radvertising podcast. I'm Damian Dayton, the creative guy, and today we're missing my co-host, Dallin Koski, the performance guy, but fortunately we have another performance guy joining us. We have Andrew Nazarian from the Sly Nerds agency. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going so good. I'm so excited about this recording. Thanks for having me.
Well, you bet. We had a great chat the other day. You had me on your pod, and my mom always said, return, you give somebody a casserole, you return the dish with another casserole in it. So,
Yeah.
I have me on yours.
All about that karma.
For those that don't know Sly Nerds, you have an agency. Why don't you tell us what Sly Nerds is and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Sly Nerds, we like to do everything pretty sly, right? But I would say that we definitely focus more so on the web design and video production side. I would say at a much smaller scale than Creatably. So we work with a lot more, small to medium size business. But everything that we do, we like to do as out of the box as possible. So we'll only work on campaigns that we think are going to be really different and make a big impact.
And so your focus is on video assets and web design. Is that what you think you guys are best at?
100%. We are a full stack digital marketing agency, but I like to just start up front with our core competencies.
Yeah, I think, any agency can do a lot of things, but any agency should know what they're great at. We offer a lot of services, but if people come to us, they're usually coming to us for this thing, and we can do a lot of those other things. But really, you're going to get your best experience with us if you're using one of the services that we're really exceptional at. And we're trying to get better at everything else, But
Me personally, the vast majority of my experience is in meta advertising, which is partially why I'm so excited about this conversation. But as a whole, yeah, we like to lead with our best foot forward for sure.
Well, cool. This pod will probably be released. It will be released long after the Super Bowl, but we're starting to see Super Bowl ads already. I thought it might be fun to take a look at a funny Super Bowl ad. Did you get the link that I sent you?
I didn't.
Okay. Did you get a chance to watch it already?
I didn't get...
Okay. Well, let's just let you play it right now and take a look at it. And I've got a couple questions to ask you afterwards.
Sorry, bud. Not while I weed. Hey! Who let the dogs out?
Spruce, a new weed and grass killer that's safe for use around people and pets.
Does it actually work?
Visible results in 1 hour and dead weeds in 1 day.
Spruce works.
Spruce, the new, hard-working, worry-free weed and grass killer.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a few what I call my Super Bowl questions, but first just gut reaction. What'd you think?
I liked it. The thing that immediately bothered me is it felt very AI generated. At least the animals felt super AI generated. For me personally, that's kind of like a red flag. Especially if the focus of the ad is on animals. I feel like we kind of have to nail the animals. I don't, just trying to think about like the specific points of the ad. I don't really even remember the differentiators. Like I remember seeing that shot of, weed dying. Maybe they said a day, maybe they said a week. I feel like, the focus of the ad was on, like a pool party and having a bunch of fun, but I don't know why this product would be better than another.
Yeah. So these are my Super Bowl questions. I love your reaction. I think it's like one thing I try to remind people of is you and I might work in advertising, but everybody is a professional commercial watcher, right? We all watch commercials. And so I try to take off my professional brain or professional hat and just watch a commercial as somebody sitting at home. What do I think, And I love seeing people release ads a little early. I thought it was funny that I couldn't find this one on YouTube. Like they're doing just a regional buy during the Super Bowl. But I did find it on Daily Motion. I'm like, oh, it's fun. It's got some energy. There's some things that I really like that they did. But it's interesting that it does have like AI energy. They definitely used real people. There's a couple shots that I can tell for sure were real dogs. But it is interesting to me that as consumers, we're picking up AI energy like sooner and sooner. Like one day I'll see something, AI doing something new and revolutionary that I've never seen before and be like, wow, that's cool. And then within like a month or 2 months, it doesn't take me too long before that uncanny valley hits. And we start like feeling, and I'm wondering if that will affect commercials and make us really want to, it's hard for for a marketing director not to use AI in some way because it reduces costs on so many things.
Significant.
But it makes me wonder if we're going to want to see things that are less polished and want to lean more into authenticity, and not the way that brands did 15 years ago when everything was like grimy, and like we shot this in an oily garage. But just like, I want to see people stumble on their words, and I want the lighting to be a little bit less than perfect. And because it is interesting, I was trying to dissect what is it about this ad that gives me AI energy. But so here's my 4 Super Bowl questions, because people always like to tell me about their favorite ads after the Super Bowl. After watching the ad one time, do you remember who the ad was for? Spruce. Okay, so they did good there. Most people drop off, like 50% drop off at that. They'll want to tell me about the ad with the monkey or the cat, their favorite ad. And it's interesting, some ads that people have seen 10 or 11 times, they love the ad and they can't tell me who it's for. So they got good brand recognition. I think it was clever, expensive to use an existing song and have their custom lyrics added to it. But they even did a graphic reminding me this is a new brand. And so I think that's pretty effective. They got me to remember the brand. So they get some points there. The next thing is, what does the product do?
It's a weed killer.
Weed killer. So they got that far. We usually lose another 50% of people there. How is that product different than other products? I'm a little biased because I watched it a couple times in preparation. Do you remember how it was different than other products?
No.
And their central conceit of the ad was the who let the dogs out is you let the dogs out because they kill weeds and they're safe for dogs and safe for humans, which was like the whole point of the ad. So I think it's interesting that recall on that core value proposition, sometimes we get so clever and maybe it doesn't make it, the water doesn't make it all the way to the end of the row. And my last one, which is always causes pause, because it's not a great test, but how likely are you to buy the product? I don't know if you have a yard or not, but I was like,
I was just going to say, I don't own a home.
so yeah, we might not be the consumer. I think they performed fairly well. One of the reasons why I wanted to share this ad with you in particular is this ad was done by a great agency. It was done by Raindrop out of California. They do a lot of good work, but they're kind of known for working in the long form internet space. Some of the space where we work, it's not their first Super Bowl ad. They did Dr. Squatch, which is, they had a lot of success with that, and they did a Super Bowl ad for Dr. Squatch. Interestingly, this is for, I believe this company is owned by Procter & Gamble that does a lot of other soaps, so not in the same space, but probably not going to be able to do that's a little bit inside baseball, but probably not a lot of soap commercials for Procter and Gamble if they're doing this brand. But for a brand launch, I don't know. I mean, so last year there were 123 million viewers for the Super Bowl. It was about $7 million if you wanted to do a national. I think this is a regional time buy, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were still spending in the seven figures for this ad buy, you know. And if you're getting a Super Bowl ad, do you think people are going to remember this? Is it crazy enough that they're going to remember? I think we kind of could critique Super Bowl ads on a different level than other ads because they spend a lot more money on it, you know. Is this one going to stand out? I don't know. I think it was effectively and competently done as an ad. But I think it's also saying, like, I think brands 5 years ago were wanting to launch on D2C first. And it looks like this brand from a larger company, you know, there's nothing in the ad that connects it to the larger company. So it feels like it's a brand new product. And I think that's a fairly risky move to launch the brand straight on Super Bowl Sunday. But maybe I'm not in the region. Maybe they've been running local ads more. So I wanted to talk to you about something that I think that applies to both of us, which is content diversity. More and more brands aren't taking the big swings like this and going for the Super Bowl ads. They need an ad because, you know, you have your experience in Meta. What are you seeing as far as a content ecosystem? Are you seeing people getting more diverse in their content these days or taking the big swings? What type of content are you seeing your clients have success with?
I think that something that I preach really often is the diversification, right? I really want to be doing much more of a separate approach based on different demographics, based on where people are at in the buying journey, right? You know, number one, I don't own a dog. Number two, I have no idea if other weed killers are also non-toxic. So I can't really speak to if that was like a big differentiation. Something I want to clear up with you. When you say a big swing, do you just mean the scale of this kind of campaign?
Well, I think when I say a big swing, you know, sometimes that can be a creative risk. You know, like we're going to come out with something really crazy and get everybody. Sometimes it's just the amount of spend. I mean, I look at this ad and I have to think this brand probably just in content creation, it could be done for cheaper, but I'm guessing they spent somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million plus making this ad. And their ad buy just for, you know, during the Super Bowl is going to be, you know, seven figures, at least $1 million, even if it's a regional ad. That's what I'm thinking they're probably spending. So for a new brand, that's a big swing. You know, a big part of your marketing budget is being spent on one asset and one moment to see it. And a lot of brands that we work with, we're spending 60 to 70% of their budget, sometimes 80 at the top of the funnel, trying to get performance there, you know. Whereas some people kind of take the mindset where they're kind of testing into success. Like, well, let's create 40 different ad units and find what is the pillar, what are the brand pillars that drive marketing performance. In this ad, Spruce talked about how it's safe for dogs, but they mentioned that it's also safe for humans, you know. But I think their hoping is cute dogs will get likes. You know, people love cute dogs, so that will get. But on the Super Bowl, it's like, you know, the cute puppy's not going to be enough. You need a cute monkey. You need an elephant doing push-ups, or you need, you know, because there will probably be 5 commercials with puppies in them that day, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I mean by a big swing. We talked about some of the differences in our agencies, but we also like to have guests from all different walks of business, because as an agency, you cannot just serve one type of client. You know, whether you serve small and medium-sized companies, bigger brands, national brands, market or category kings, you can often learn from up-and-coming brands things that big brands aren't doing. And I feel like Spruce maybe tried to skip a couple of steps as they're launching, taking a big swing, spending a lot of money, but it might not be enough to break through that noise. As a weed killer, I guess it's like, oh, maybe this is a little bit greener than other ones. Safe for dogs, safe for me. The ad has a lot of fun energy, but really on the Super Bowl, you're banking on that simultaneity, and you're hoping for a little bit of virality. You're hoping for a little bit of shareability. It's certainly more entertaining to watch than most commercials for me. I'd watch that. I'd be like, hey, the Bahama Men, I forget the name of the band that did Who Let the Dogs Out. I'm glad that they can still get a paycheck. That makes me happy. I think overall, it was a professionally well done ad, but it is interesting that it has that tinge of AI, and I wonder how the average consumer is going to start taking that. There's a couple ads that have gone viral in the wrong ways lately. There was the one that was a Skechers in Vogue magazine, where it's like, oh, they took this image and they didn't really think about who's seeing this ad, and that uncanny valley. There's part of it's like, oh, that's pretty, but we feel a separation. That's not for me. I want something that's a little bit more human, in my ads. So leaving that ad behind, let's talk about our agencies and talk about what you have found working for you right now. A lot of people are talking about UGC. A lot of people are talking about diversity in content itself. For a long time, I've been preaching, let the creative do the targeting, and I feel like Meta, it no longer cares who you're picking as your target. Their machine learning and their AI is going to pick your target for you. Your creative, who they think is going to respond. It's AI is making that decision. The days of your account being in learning phase for weeks don't really happen anymore. It makes the decision quick and sometimes wrong. And so you need to be targeting other pieces. What are you guys finding?
Very similar to what you just mentioned. Our biggest focus is on creative as well. And I think you nailed it with diversity, right? Not only do we want to focus on the creative, but we want to focus on the messaging and making sure that we're nailing it. If we do, like on Meta, if we do anything close to a robust build out on the ad set level, it's completely, determined based on how effective we think, the actual creative is going to be itself. So that what's working right now is better creative than we've ever had before, right? If a client comes to me and says, anything in the array of Facebook ads never worked for me, or, our performance has majorly dropped 9 times out of 10. It's because there's been literally no thought into the creative, right?
Yeah.
I think in today's market, it just needs to be a cut above the rest, right? And I'm frankly shocked by seeing how many really bad ads are still out there constantly.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many people put lots of money towards bad ads. I think a lot of things that you probably deal with and we deal with is we're both creatives who've done a little bit of ad buying. And so that trains your brain a certain way to realize, oh, this was a good idea for me, but America didn't care for it. And so I've got to quickly learn what was a good idea for me and what's a good idea for everybody else. And there's music that I like, but that's not for everybody else, And there's ads that I like that are not for everybody else. But there's an interesting intersection. You can't just be crowd pleasers. A little bit of that uniqueness, a little bit of that quirk helps you stand out. A little bit of that humanness helps you stand out with what you're doing in your ads.
Yeah, and I think that that's why, diversity in your team is extremely important. I'm kind of the reverse of what you just mentioned. Historically, I've been a media buyer. I've been very data focused, before the days of, these Apple changes, right? My media buying strategy was entirely on setup and structure, right?
Yeah.
That's how I made the big bucks, right? By having these incredibly complex ad buying structures. That's why I think I've been able to, and collectively we've been able to produce such solid results at Sly Nerds, is because of that diversity. I still have, a lot of the experience on, the history of ad buying structure, but everybody else on the Sly Nerd team is way more creative focused. So a lot of the times, I think an ad is going to be phenomenal, and like you said, the reality is it doesn't perform like I thought it would. So I agree. It's incredibly important for us to take all of those items into consideration. And really do the testing. That's another important thing as well. I know this is like almost redundant, or at least me saying it feels redundant, but testing is incredibly important, right?
Well, and I think that's where the creativity of somebody like yourself comes in. There's a lot of people that their answer to testing is test everything. You need a creative buyer that knows what needs to be tested, because I've been in other people's accounts before. I'm like, well, they're testing a million variables except for the important ones. Talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you like to get in and test? What are the first things that you think that a client should be testing in their ads?
I feel like that's really a case by case basis, depending on, what we're trying to accomplish. But what I can say is consistent amongst, all of the clients that we work with. Surprisingly, what I think that we do different than a lot of media buying is, a more structuredized testing approach, right? You nailed it, right? They're like, sure, they have, 3 ad sets with 3 ads, but each one of those ads have different pieces of copy, right? There's no structure into considering, essentially, I guess what I would consider like the scientific method, right? We're not isolating any variables. So for me, again, the priority is always going to be the creative. One of the first things that I test. I would love to know if this is something that you guys consider, but like we have built, like in Meta, we built a custom formula, the scroll to stop. It was
almost every smart ad buyer I know is using some version of the scroll to stop. Like,
okay, for sure.
Yeah, scroll to stop. They call it the thumb stopper metric, or the
Yes.
Absolutely.
So that's a very first thing that we're going to be looking into, right? So that's going to be like our immediate test, and then of course past that we'll go into click-through rates, and then eventually, return on ad spend and so on and so forth. But I would say that the heaviest focus is on getting someone to stop in the first place.
Yeah, we do tell our clients, the biggest risk you can take as an advertiser, especially in the early days, is being ignored. And that's, people come to us and they have either no content or a lot of content, but it has not been done very purposefully. So definitely getting people's attention matters a lot. Although Dallin, I wish he was here. He was sick today, so he couldn't join us on the podcast, and had some other things he had to take care of. But he and I have been having an argument, or robust discussion, let's say, about the role of a hook these days. And everybody's been talking about hooks for the last 15 years, and they're important. But he would say it's less important about a big flashy thing happening and more about making a promise that you're going to deliver something by the end of the ad. That's more powerful. And I call it a hey rather than a hook. It's like, hey, watch this magic trick at the end. I'll show you how it's done. That I'm willing to invest more in than starting with an explosion, because everybody started with explosions. And I think the ad we looked at today is kind of an example with like, let's show cute dogs. Everybody's used that trick now. And so it's not, and it is, we're seeing that hook can sometimes be a very simple question. And even a lot of brands are leaning into it, especially in your UGC, you're seeing ads that are like, whatever you do, don't buy this product. And it's an ad for the product because that is making you approach, ooh, I want to hear why not. And they're like, because it's too good. You're like, you fooled me. So promises are working, but I think people also are aware of the bamboozle. Like you do not want to bamboozle your clients. And it's like, you're going to get some short-term success there, but that won't scale up. You have to promise something valuable that customers want and not just what you think your product does, you know? And I don't know whether it's going to be watch me saw this lady in half or watch me blow up this car. But sometimes it's going to be watch the subtle trick that my phone can do that nobody else's phone can do. Or, watch me do. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of people are running a lot of tests. And I think the ad buyer from 5 years ago that could be very effective by segmenting out 30 different audiences, their target audiences, is now segmenting out the creative, and Meta is finding the audience for them. But they're like, oh, we're going to test this. If I was running Spruce, I might say, we're going to do a dog ad, but let's do one for people with children. Let's do one with people that hate chemicals. Let's do, but I do think that ad was really effective at showing you the one thing you remembered, even though it's got tons of dogs, like I saw the weed dying in a day. Like it's got to work or it doesn't matter how crazy or zany you get. But we see more segmentation, not of targeted audience, but segmenting creative into going after very distinct persona type, which I'm not sure if that's the strategy I would recommend at the top of your funnel, but I would definitely be testing that. Where a lot of people are like, well, we're running lots of A/B tests, but they're like, let's A/B test with a girl and a man and a blue button and a red button. And those I call those 3% tests, because 3% won't make a difference if you're trying to scale up a brand. It's always worth economizing. And there's a lot of ad buyers out there who know how to run a test. But don't know which tests to have. So we like to push what I call the mad scientist mentality. Like, what are the big questions that you aren't asking? What are the questions that your competitors are not asking? They're all doing the same thing. What aren't they doing that you need to test?
Yeah. I would view that at, what you call your 3% test optimization. I think that can help down the line for sure. But I agree that's not really a test, right? And in the testing phase, that's when you can strike out, right? So, and a lot of the time, the faster we fail, the quicker we can, get to the right place, right? So if we are just testing different colors or the difference between a male and female as the main role is really insignificant. I totally agree. The more and more I think about that ad, I try and think about other brands that I think did a really successful job standing out. To me and to my age demographic, I'll always remember Skittles commercials, Taste the Rainbow. Mountain Dew has had wild advertising. Old Spice, phenomenal. I'll never forget Terry Crews, controlling all the things with his muscles. But thinking about that in depth, I already trusted those brands. It just absolutely solidified that I'll always remember those pieces of creative. I don't know if I would make such a swing either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say this to clients all the time. They can advertise like Skittles because they're Skittles, because they've gotten to that place. And 10 years ago, all of our clients wanted to make an ad that looks like an Apple ad. But I'm like, you can't act like Apple until you're Apple. Remember to get to that place. Remember, Apple was the minority computer that only designers and filmmakers used. until they did the Mac versus the PC ad. That's what helped them cross the chasm. And I think it's really important for clients they will often fall in love with a certain type of marketing or branding. It's like, but I tell clients, your logo doesn't really matter until you're making 100 million. I mean, it's good I love good design, and I don't want to push people to bad design, but I've seen companies go through their third or fourth rebrand in 3 or 4 years. Like, that's not what's keeping from people buying. They don't understand what you do and why that's important to them, you know? And I've also seen people aggressively go after one demographic before knowing who's actually going to buy it. And we've been debating these two terms that I don't know. I think if we came up with this first one we didn't, which is product market fit, like you need to prove product market fit, but the other is product marketing fit, which is, yeah, we know people want it. We know people will buy it, but is the type of marketing we're doing the right for those people? And is there marketing that can reach people that are not the people who bought in our first test? So you might have a marketing test and you find a bunch of consumers, but they're the early adopters. How do you cross the chasm and go help a company get to the next stage? Optimization will help you get 3 to 5% more profit, hopefully, but that can also wane, you know. And an interesting thing that I think we're seeing happening, especially around UGC, which we use and we create UGC for clients, but it's not our hero. It's like the potatoes and the meat and the potatoes. Mm-hmm. But that has had this nice little spike, and it's doing something, but it kind of has a low shelf life. It expires quickly, but I think that spike is not happening anymore because there's so many people doing it. It worked at first because it's like, oh, this seems like what everything else I'm watching on TikTok.
Yes.
But now it's just like, oh, this is another UGC commercial. UGC has to look. It can't be just buy this thing. I now have. Here's the two things that are on my radar right now. I'll see if you have seen them. I'm watching hands for two reasons. AI hands look a different way. They don't know how to do. But there's the other thing I'm calling influencer hands. There's UGC hands. There's certain UGC hand shapes that you influencers use. This is one of them, usually with long nails. There's something about, and as soon as I see the influencer hands, I'm like, they don't have anything important to tell me because they've gotten good at these hands things. And
yeah,
sometimes it's like doing, ASMR stuff with it. But there's certain hand gestures that you see influencers using. This is one of them. The other is showing you the product, like, look at this and look at this. So it either puts me off of like, oh, this is too UGCE, or it's too AIE, but it's all about the hands these days for me.
It's a really interesting concept. My girlfriend last night was telling me a pretty interesting fact about the etymology of names and how names go out of favor, right?
Yeah.
Like, right now, the name that will be gone for a long time is like Karen for obvious reasons. But also, like, when's the last time you've met a young Pearl,
Yeah.
or Ellen, right? So
There's not a lot of
get-
Adolfs running around.
Well, yeah, for extremely obvious reasons, but
check
once
this out.
things get popular.
Dolph Lundgren, he's an Adolf and he made it work. So, yeah, but those are extreme examples.
I didn't know that.
He's an Adolf. He goes by Dolph so that, he also, he's
That's pretty.
blonde hair, blue eyes, but
Yeah, our kids would say that's pretty gangster.
yeah, but you're going to
Us
see
kids, rather.
names that 10 years ago were crazy and revolutionary are the most popular. I remember when my brother named his son Gray, or like just a color. And now it's a pretty popular, pretty common name. Ashley was the name that was very common when I was a kid. I've dated a lot of Ashleys in my life. It's not as common a name anymore. I mean, obviously Karen will disappear, but yeah, names definitely go through these cycles.
And they relate that to popularity. So once something gets done, and I know this is a little bit redundant, but once it becomes played out, it's not popular anymore. Something else that I wanted to bring up that I think is pretty interesting, and I wanted to get your insight on this. This may have been, something that they, going back to the Spruce app, may have been something they've been considering if they're really trying to hit a certain demographic. A joke amongst all of my friends and family in my age group is we are constantly we are constantly being bombarded with AI generated posts by our parents, so the older demographic, and they have no idea. My mom the other day, we have fairly fresh kittens, right? And my mom has never had a cat. So now she's in love with kittens. The last time I was over there, she's like, I just saw the cutest thing. And it is she's like, can you believe this? And she shows me a picture of a cat in an owl's nest, like the owl is raising the cats, just so clearly AI generated. And I brought that up, and so many people related to it that their parents were just like eating it up. So maybe,
Well,
for that older demographic, that really works.
yeah, maybe it does. And we have really good data that this the CPMs are pretty high on the Facebook newsfeed, right? They're getting high, but it's still an efficient ad unit. But it's largely because the demographic is much older that's staying on the newsfeed. They're not changing their behaviors. As gray as my beard is, I'm still shifting my behaviors and watching the stories and the reels and the TikToks. But I watch them on Instagram like a responsible adult 2 weeks later than the young kids. But they're slower to pick up on those trends. But I just had a thought. I think they've been talking about how our attention cycle is getting shorter. And another advertiser we talked to is talking about, he just calls it the consideration span is shorter. So I'll give you my attention, but I just have to, I determine really quickly whether this is worth giving my attention to. I don't need everything to be fast. I don't need like a garbage fast jump cut edit. I just need to quickly know whether this is worth my time. My next layer though is I think we have an instinct span that very quickly we are judging, is that AI or not? Is this worth my time or not? Is this UGC or not? Is this a paid ad or is this an honest review or not? And like our gut instinct is determining whether we're going to, because I'll watch, if I'm flipping through, I might catch a scene from a movie that somebody has reposted and determine, oh, I want to watch that. And I'll watch a half an hour through swiping through these 2-minute stories. So I'm giving them my time, but there's something that captures my attention that is not clickbaity, And we all make jokes like, here's 2 secrets that, but the third one's going to, there's the 2 secret the doctors don't want you to know. Like clickbait is so prevalent now. It is just like, it's like nothing when it goes behind our eyes because it doesn't it tells us this is not worth your time. We see those ingredients and we're seeing it going into writing and headlines, and those brands that are leaning into it are creating stuff that our short instinct cycle says this is not worth my time, even though it looks high production value. But to that older demographic, it is like, this is amazing. They got a cat to sleep in an owl's nest. Imagine what they had to do to train that poor kitty cat. I hope the owl took good care of it. But there's still, memes that are going around, and even, I think the next generation is going to be just a hyper suspicious generation. I've been saying for a long time that as a purchasing generation, we're becoming immune to adjectives. I can't say amazing, great, fantastic, wonderful, the best, because that doesn't mean anything. And so people cut through the noise with that, saying like, your computer sucks. Like, let's start my ad with something like that. And even now, I've heard that enough times now. It's like, okay, I need the next version of that speaks frankly and in real language to me, that I understand and I'm willing to hear. And I think they're going to be they're going to grow up with deep fakes being the norm. How are people going to validate? Are they simply not going to trust anything? Or are they going to go to is authority going to be something that people trust again, where it can't just be a celebrity saying, do this? Do they need to see a doctor or a professional? Or is it going to be, I trust somebody because I've watched 30 hours of their content? And, we're seeing that definitely. We've had a couple opportunities to work with celebrity and get some posts, and it just does not have the impact that it did 5 years ago. Whereas if you have an influencer in a very specific space, like that they're a specialist on 3D printing, those sorts of posts will go viral in the way that you need them if you're selling a 3D printing product, because their audience has their trust, And I think trust is going to be a much more important marketing commodity in the future.
Mm-hmm. And I think we are very close to having newer and more innovative tools to prove that.
Well, I have to wonder, I've often said, we were talking about changes to TSA. I'm interested in the tools that we develop in our minds, the tools that we develop. So we were talking about the TSA, and I said, I think the most important innovations in security that the TSA came with don't matter as much as what happened in people's minds between the third and fourth plane on 9/11. The terrorists on 9/11 entered a world where people thought a hijacker takes over a plane, it will sit on the ground for a few hours, then they'll get their money, and then they'll let us go. Once the paradigm shifted and the people on the fourth plane knew, this plane is going to be crashed and kill other people and not just ourselves, the equations in their minds changed. And I don't think even a shoe bomber or anybody else, I don't think anybody could do something with a plane with the passenger's consent ever again. Because the passenger's now like, now I just know they're going to kill us anyway. And they're going to try to kill other innocent people. So that moral equation changes. And so for all the tech that is sprung up around it, and we see it when somebody acts up on a plane and they're tying them to a chair with belts and duct tape, because there's now this sense that if somebody's acting up, it's all of our responsibility to keep it safe. So all I guess I'm saying is there will be tools to detect deep fakes, but it's interesting that evolutionarily, why is it that humans have evolved to be able to sense the uncanny valley, to sense that's not quite human. That's not quite human, and that makes me feel weird about it, and that makes me not want to trust it. And I don't care that it's doing amazing things. I want something human,
Yeah, something authentic, right?
Mm-hmm. And that word has kind of lost some of its true meaning, just like awesome used to mean something better than it does. But people want to see the stumbles and mistakes. And I think celebrity on its own won't do. You're going to need to earn trust. And part of earning trust will be by being imperfect. And I think there will be times where low production quality will win the day over that perfect backlight. Because it's definitely that golden backlight halo. It's one of my first clues that something is AI generated. It's that perfect lighting in a room full of people. I'm like, only one character here can have perfect lighting. Everybody else has to have the less than perfect lighting. So anyway, Andrew, thank you for being on my podcast. It's been fascinating talking to you about AI creativity and what's working these days. If people want to see you and find your work, where can they find you?
Well, they should definitely follow along with, the Sly Agencies podcast. Make sure they listen to your episode, what was one of my absolute favorites. We post every week on Wednesday on all platforms. Follow us at Sly Nerds on Instagram and check out our website, slynerds.com.
All right. Thank you so much. And if you want to subscribe to our podcast, you can find it at totallyradvertising.com or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And now on YouTube, you'll be able to watch and see just how ugly I am. We'll see you next time on the Totally Radvertising Podcast.
It's totally rad.
Join us every week right here on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or wherever you listen to stuff for your pods.